Good morning to Keep the Faith with Pastor Frank. It's been a couple of days since I've been on. I This morning we're going to be looking at First Corinthians chapter 2, uh, and we'll start with verse 7. And I just want to go through a passage of scripture that's uh, pretty widely known, but just make a couple of comments in our devotion this morning. So if you join us this morning, if you'll say hi, I'll greet you, and we'll get started with this and just have a couple of minutes together this morning. Good morning, Brother Lee. Good to see you online. It was good to see you in person. Sister Zen, it's good to see you this morning, Brother Robert. Sister Liz, good to see you online this morning. God bless you. And good morning, Gigi. Good to see you online. Brother Lewis and Sister Gail, it's good to see you online. There's my mother. Good morning, Mom. How you doing? And so this morning, we're going to look at a passage of Scripture, and I'm going to read from 1 Corinthians chapter 2. I'm going to start in verse 7. It's one of those kind of things we could start in any verse here, but it says, "No, the wisdom we speak of in this is the mystery of God, his plan that was previously hidden, even though he made it for our ultimate glory before the world began. But the rulers of this world have not understood it. If they had, they would not have crucified our glorious Lord." That is what the scripture means when they say, "No eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him." But it was to us that God revealed these things by his Spirit. For his Spirit searches out everything and shows us God's deep secrets. No one can know a person's thoughts except that person's own spirit, and no one can know God's thoughts except God's own spirit. And we have received God's Spirit, not the world's spirit, so we can know the wonderful things God has freely given us. When we tell you these things, we do not use words that come from human wisdom. Instead, we speak words given to us by the Spirit, using the Spirit's words to explain spiritual truth. But people who aren't spiritual can't receive these truths from God's Spirit. It all sounds foolish to them and they can't understand it. For only those who are spiritual can understand what the Spirit means. Those who are spiritual can evaluate all things, but they themselves cannot be evaluated for others. For who can know the Lord's thoughts? Who knows enough to teach him? But we understand these things because we have the mind of Christ. Now, a lot of people use that scripture that says that no eye has seen, nor ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. But what the scripture says right after that is, "Good morning, Brother Gary. It's good to see you, Pastor. Pray you're doing well, you and Mary." But what the scripture says right after that, it says in verse 9, it says, "No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him." But what the scripture says right after that is verse 10, "But it was to us that God revealed these things by his Spirit. For his Spirit searches out everything and shows us God's deep secret. No one can know a person's thought except that person's own spirit, and no one can know God's thought except God's own Spirit. And we have received God's Spirit so we can know the wonderful things God has freely given us. So the truth is that what this tells us, and if you go all the way down to the end, it says that we who are Christians, we who've been born again, have the Spirit of God in us, not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit of God. That's the reason we can understand the things that have been revealed to us by God. And God reveals to us many wonderful things, not only things that are going to be available to us in heaven, but also many things that are available to us in this world. You see, God's blessings aren't reserved just for those who make it to heaven. God's blessings also are upon those who live for Him in during this in this world. So during this time, so I know that if you're a believer, you're a Christian, you're born again, you can name multiple blessings that God has blessed you with just because He loves you. So the truth is you don't have to wait till you get to heaven to be blessed. Neither do you have to wait till you get to heaven to understand what God has prepared for you there, or to let yourself imagine what God has prepared for you there, because God gives us uh, His Spirit. And the thing of it is that we need to understand is that as God gives us His Spirit, then He gives us the ability to understand not only the things that He has prepared for us, but things about ourselves that help us to be able to touch the lives of others. And it's important for us as we go forward in our walk with the Lord to continually be seeking God, that He can pour into us and share with us the wonderful blessings that He has prepared for those who love Him, so we can share that with others around that need to know the love and beauty and grace of Christ. So as as uh, as we have opportunity to share with people, as we have opportunity to talk to people, understand that someone that doesn't know Christ isn't going to understand a lot of the things that you try to tell them that God has prepared for them. It's not because they don't want to understand. It's because without being born again, they are not going to be spiritually ready to understand the wonderful things God has prepared for those who love Him. And one of as we go forward, we need to continue to be spiritually prepared for God to continue to show us not only what He's prepared for us, but how we can communicate the love of Christ to others. And the last piece of this verse says, but we can understand these things, for we have the mind of Christ. Now that is a very uh, wonderful thing that we are told that we can understand, because through the Spirit of God, through the Spirit of Christ, we have the mind of Christ. So we can understand spiritual things. So I know that there are those that will try to teach you that you can't understand spiritual things, but this passage of Scripture specifically uh, tells us that because we have the Spirit of God, we have the Spirit of Christ, because His Spirit lives in us, we can understand the things of God. I know so many people try to tell us that you can't understand God. I think that we're given His Spirit so that we can understand not only God, but His love for people, so that we can have that same love and let other people uh, touch their lives, help them and touch their lives through the Spirit of Christ that's in us. So as we go through this passage of scripture and we look at the things that it gives us an idea that instead of, I guess I would say, going on blind faith, this gives us an indication that because God's Spirit lives in us, we can understand many of the things that God has prepared for those who love Him and those who have committed their lives to Him. We can understand the things that He's prepared, and we can understand that we can walk and live in the blessings of God in this world right now. So I just want to encourage you this morning and encourage you to be lifted up and enjoy what God is blessing you with. Enjoy understanding who God is in your life, who He is to you, and share that with others so that they may come to have Christ in them and have that same hope and understanding. So this morning, just remember, if the devil starts lying to you, we have the mind of Christ. The devil couldn't lie to Jesus. He can't lie to you. God's Spirit is in you. I just pray that God would bless you the rest of this week and uh, just minister to you in a great and mighty way. Much love to everyone. Keep the faith. I'll see you Monday morning, God willing.